My name is Raymond. I am 60, 3 years old. I have rough hands from 37 years of working construction. I have a bad knee that clicks every time I climb stairs. I have a small house with a leaking roof. I keep patching myself because I never wanted to spend money on things I could fix with my own 2 hands. And I have a son. His name is Daniel. Daniel is 29 years old. He is tall, educated, and handsome. He got his mother's eyes and my stubbornness. He wears nice shoes and drives a clean car. He speaks well. He carries himself like a man who has never once worried about money. That is because I made sure he never had to. I worked overtime shifts. I skipped lunches. I wore the same 3 shirts for 6 years. I borrowed against my pension. I did everything a father is supposed to do, and then some, so that my son would have a life better than mine. And on the day of his wedding, he sent me a text message, 7 words. You can watch the highlights online, Dad. I sat in my kitchen, alone, holding that phone. And I just typed back, okay, enjoy your day. I didn't cry, I didn't call, I didn't beg. I just put the phone down, poured myself a cup of cold coffee, and sat there in the silence of a house that used to be full of noise. The next morning he kept calling me, over and over, but by then, everything had already changed. Let me take you back, because none of this makes sense unless you understand where we started. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. My father was a coal worker. My mother cleaned offices at night. We were not rich. We were not even comfortable. We were just surviving. Every week was a quiet negotiation between what we needed and what we could afford. But there was love in that house, a lot of it. My parents never missed a single school event. They never made me feel like a burden. My father used to say, Raymond, the only thing I can give you that nobody can take away is your education and my example. I never forgot those words. I met my wife, Patricia, when I was 22. She was working at a diner near my construction site. She had dark hair and a laugh that could fill a room. I asked her for a phone number. She gave me a fake one. I came back the next day anyway. She laughed and gave me the real one. We got married 2 years later with $400 and a borrowed suit. We had Daniel when I was 26, and from the moment I held that boy in my arms, I made a decision, a silent, bone-deep decision. I said to myself, this child will never know what it feels like to go without. And I kept that promise. Patricia and I both worked. She took up bookkeeping after Daniel was born. I took every overtime shift I could get. We didn't take vacations. We didn't buy new cars. We saved. We invested. We scraped and clipped and sacrificed. And Daniel had everything, good schools, new clothes, sports equipment, a car on his 16th birthday used but clean, college tuition fully paid, no student loans, no part-time jobs to survive. He could just focus on his future, and his future looked bright. He graduated with a degree in business, got a good job at a financial firm in Chicago, started earning more in 1 year than I used to earn in 3. I was so proud of him. I used to show his photo to my coworkers. That's my son, Daniel, finance guy in Chicago, smart as a whip. I was proud like only a father who built something from nothing can be proud. I should have paid more attention to the signs. But love makes you blind to warning signs. And I loved my son blindly, completely, the way only a parent can. Daniel met Jessica at work. She was a junior analyst at his firm. She was, and I will be honest here, a very beautiful young woman. Polished, confident, the kind of person who walked into a room and immediately understood the social order of things. The first time Daniel brought her home for Thanksgiving, I cooked for 2 days. Patricia made her famous sweet potato casserole. We cleaned the house, put out the good plates. Jessica walked in, looked around our modest home, and smiled the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. She was polite. She was perfectly precisely polite. She said the right things at the right moments. She complimented Patricia's casserole. She asked about my work, but something about her made me feel like I was being assessed. Like I was a piece of furniture she was deciding whether to keep or throw away. Patricia felt it too. Later that night, after they left, she said to me, "Ray, that girl looked at this house like she was apologizing for it." I told her she was reading too much into things. I should have listened to Patricia. Patricia was always smarter than me about people. Over the next year, the visits became less frequent. Daniel started making excuses. "We're busy, Dad. Jessica has family things. It's a long drive." The phone calls shortened. The texts became more formal. Less "Hey Dad, how are you?" and more just checking in. I told myself it was normal. He had a new life, a new world. People grow up and grow busy. That's how it goes. Then came the engagement. Daniel called me on a Sunday morning. "Dad, I proposed to Jessica last night. She said yes." I felt a rush of joy so strong I had to sit down. "Daniel, son, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you." "Thanks, Dad. We're excited." There was a pause. "Just a small one, but it was there. We're planning the wedding for next June. Jessica has a lot of ideas. It's going to be a big event, of course," I said. "Whatever you need, son. You know I'm here." And I meant that. Every word. A few weeks later, Daniel drove down for a weekend visit. It was the first time in 7 months he had come home without Jessica. We sat at the kitchen table, Daniel, Patricia, and me, and he slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a budget estimate for the wedding. I looked at the number at the bottom, $87,000. I kept my face steady. I had learned in 37 years of construction to never let your face show when a number shocks you. "This is what Jessica is envisioning," he said. "A venue outside the city, 220 guests. A live band, a photo booth, a full-plated dinner, floral arrangements, the works." Patricia reached under the table and put her hand on my knee. "Daniel," she said carefully, "that's a very large number." "I know," he said, "but this is what Jessica wants. And Dad," he looked at me, "then you always said you wanted to help with the wedding." I had said that. Years ago, when Daniel was in college, I had said, "When you get married, son, I'll do everything I can to help." I meant it as a promise of support, of presence, of love. But Daniel had apparently stored that sentence in a filing cabinet labeled financial commitments. I looked at the paper again. Then I looked at my son. "How much are Jessica's parents contributing?" He shifted in his seat. "There, covering some things, the rehearsal dinner, the honeymoon, and the rest. We were hoping you could help with the venue and catering. That's about $52,000. That was nearly everything Patricia and I had saved over the last 4 years. That was the new roof we needed. That was Patricia's dental surgery she had been putting off. That was the emergency fund we had built, slowly and painfully, dollar by dollar. Patricia's hand tightened on my knee. I looked at my son's face. He looked nervous, but underneath the nervousness there was something else. An expectation, the look of someone who already knows the answer will be yes. "I'll figure it out," I said. And the relief on his face, the immediate, uncomplicated relief, told me everything I needed to know about how this conversation had been expected to go. Over the next several months, I transferred money. First, it was the deposit for the venue, $12,000. Then the catering company needed a contract payment, $18,000. Then there was the floral arrangement deposit, the band booking fee, the rented chairs and linens. Every few weeks, there was a new request. Each one came through Daniel via text, usually something like, "Hey Dad, next payment is due. Can you do $6,000 by Friday?" I always did it. What I was not part of was any of the planning. I was not invited to the venue tour. I was not consulted on the menu. I was not asked about seating arrangements, or the guest list, or the schedule. Patricia and I were not included in any meetings with the wedding planner. One Sunday, Patricia called Daniel and asked if we could join the next planning session. She wanted to feel involved. She wanted to meet the wedding planner, see the venue photos, something, anything. Daniel said he would ask Jessica. He never called back. 2 weeks later, Patricia tried again. She asked if we could at least meet with Jessica and her parents for dinner, to get to know them, to start building a relationship before the wedding. Daniel texted back, "It's just a really busy time, Mom. Maybe after the wedding." Patricia put her phone down and looked out the window for a long time. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I kept telling myself, after the wedding, things will settle down. After the wedding, we'll all sit together and laugh about how stressful the planning was. After the wedding, things will go back to normal. I held onto that belief like a man holds onto the side of a ship in rough water. I was wrong. 3 weeks before the wedding, I called Daniel. I wanted to know about the rehearsal dinner schedule because Patricia and I needed to book a hotel in Chicago. I wanted to know what time we should arrive on the wedding day. I wanted to know if there was anything we could do to help in the final days, set up chairs, pick up packages, anything. Daniel picked up on the fourth ring. "Hey, Dad." His voice sounded stiff, careful. "Hey, son. Just calling to work out the logistics for the wedding. We need to book the hotel. What are the arrival times looking like?" Silence. Not a long silence, maybe 4 seconds, but it was the loudest 4 seconds of my life. "Dad," he said, "I've been meaning to talk to you about that." "Okay," I said. My voice was steady, my hand was not. "The wedding, it's become a very specific kind of event. Jessica's family and their friends have a certain social dynamic. The guest list had to be trimmed very carefully, and Jessica feels. She feels that mixing different." He stopped and started again. "The venue has a very limited capacity." "Daniel." I said his name quietly. "What are you telling me?" Another pause. "We didn't put you and Mom on the final guest list, Dad. I'm sorry. It got complicated." I sat down. I don't remember deciding to sit down. My legs just stopped working, and I found myself in my kitchen chair. "You didn't put us on the guest list," I repeated. "It's not personal. We are your parents, Daniel." I know that, Dad, but Jessica's side has a lot of people, and it's a seated dinner, and the numbers just didn't what?" I asked. And my voice came out so quiet, he must have had to press the phone closer to his ear. He didn't finish that sentence. "I'll send you a link," he said instead. "The venue is hiring a live stream company. You can watch everything online. And after we get back from the honeymoon, we'll have you both over for dinner. We'll celebrate properly." I didn't speak for a moment. Then I said, "Okay, Daniel, enjoy your day." I hung up. Patricia was standing in the doorway. She had heard enough. She walked to me slowly and put both her hands on my face the way she used to do when I came home from difficult days at work. She looked at me for a long time. Then she went upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close softly, and I sat there in that kitchen, alone, in the house we had worked our whole lives to fill with love. Then, the next day, he sent the text, in writing, as if saying it out loud hadn't been enough. "Hey Dad, the live stream link for Saturday. You can watch the highlights online." Smiling face with smiling eyes. The little smiley face almost broke me more than anything else. I typed back, "Okay, enjoy your day." I put the phone on the table, and I made a decision. Here is what Daniel did not know. 3 weeks earlier, before that phone call, before the text message, before any of this, I had received a letter. It came from a law office in Columbus. It was regarding my Uncle Harold. Now, Uncle Harold was my father's older brother. He never married, never had children. He lived alone in a farmhouse outside Columbus for 40 years. He was a quiet man, a private man. Some people in the family called him eccentric. He collected books. He drove a 20-year-old truck. He wore flannel shirts every day of the year, summer included. I used to visit him when I was a boy. I loved him. He taught me how to play chess. He taught me how to identify birds by their call. When I was 19 and my father got sick, Uncle Harold drove 4 hours to help us without being asked. When Daniel was a baby, Uncle Harold held him once and said, "Raymond, this boy has got good bones. Raise him right." After that, Uncle Harold and I drifted into the comfortable distance of busy lives. Christmas cards, occasional calls, but always warmth when we spoke. He passed away quietly in February. I drove to Columbus alone for the small funeral. Daniel said he couldn't make it, busy with work. Jessica had something, the usual. I stood at that graveside and said goodbye to a good man. What I did not know, what nobody in the family knew, was what Uncle Harold had spent 40 years quietly doing. He had bought farmland in 1987, then more in 1991. He had mineral rights on 2 of those properties. He had invested, slowly and carefully, for 4 decades. He lived simply because he chose to, not because he had to. The letter from the law office informed me that Uncle Harold had left me everything. His estate, after all taxes and fees were settled, totaled just over $2.4 million. I read that letter 4 times before I believed it. I hadn't told anyone, not Patricia, not Daniel, not a single person. I was still processing it myself. I had an appointment with the attorney scheduled for the Monday after the wedding. I was going to tell Daniel after the wedding. I had planned to sit down with him and his new wife and say, "Son, I have some news. Our lives are about to change." But that was before the text message, before the smiley face, before my wife went upstairs and closed the door so I wouldn't hear her cry. I sat in that kitchen and I thought about Uncle Harold's words, "Raise him right." And I thought, did I? I looked around that kitchen, the worn linoleum floor I kept meaning to replace, the cabinet door that hung a little crooked, the window above the sink that let in a cold draft every winter. I had given my son everything I had, and he had decided that wasn't worth a seat at his wedding table, so I made my decision. I called the attorney on Friday morning, the day before the wedding, and I moved my Monday appointment to that same afternoon. Saturday came like any other day. I woke up early. I made coffee. Patricia came downstairs in her robe and sat across from me. We didn't talk for a while. We just drank our coffee and listened to the birds outside. Then she said, "Should we watch it, the live stream?" I looked at her. Her eyes were dry but tired. She had not been sleeping well. "No," I said gently. "Let's go to that little Italian place you like, the one in town. Order the good pasta. Have a real lunch." She looked at me for a moment, then she nodded. "Okay." We got dressed. I put on my good shirt. She wore the blue dress she saved for special occasions. We drove to the little Italian restaurant, and we sat by the window, and we ate a long, quiet, beautiful lunch together. She ordered tiramisu for dessert. I had cannoli. We shared both. At one point, she reached across the table and took my hand. "We did everything right, Raymond," she said. "I know," I said. "Then how?" "I don't know," I said. "But I think things are going to change." She looked at me curiously. I squeezed her hand. "Trust me," I said. We drove home in the late afternoon sun and sat on the porch and watched the light change across the yard. It was a good day in the end, quieter than it should have been, smaller than it deserved to be, but good. 220 people were celebrating at an $87,000 event 300 miles away, and the man who had made most of that possible was eating cannoli and holding his wife's hand on a porch in Ohio. That evening, my phone buzzed once. A photo from Daniel, him and Jessica at the altar, both smiling. She in a white gown, him in a tuxedo, a beautiful photo. I showed it to Patricia. She looked at it for a long time. Then she handed the phone back and went inside. I looked at the photo alone. "Congratulations, son," I said to nobody. Sunday morning, I was on my second cup of coffee when my phone started ringing. "Daniel." I let it ring. It stopped, then it rang again. I let it ring again. Patricia came downstairs, heard the phone, looked at me. "Daniel?" she asked. "Yes." "Are you going to answer?" I thought about it. "Not yet." She sat down without asking more questions. That is the thing about Patricia. After 35 years, she understands when to ask, and when to just sit beside me. Daniel called 6 times that morning. On the 7th call, I answered. "Dad." His voice was strange, tight, like a wire pulled too taut. "Daniel, congratulations. How was the wedding?" "It was." He stopped. "Dad, I need to tell you something. I heard something last night, at the reception. Jessica's father was talking to his brother, and I heard your name." I waited. He said he had run your name through some financial search. Because of the money you were contributing to the wedding, he said. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "He said you came up associated with a significant estate transfer. A really significant one." "Ah, so word had gotten out faster than I expected." Small legal communities. People talk. "Dad, is that true? Uncle Harold? Did he leave you something?" "He did." I said simply. Silence. "How much?" I took a sip of coffee. "More than you'd expect, Dad." His voice was different now. Something had shifted in it. "Dad, I'm sorry about the wedding. I should have, Daniel," I said. And my voice was not angry. It was not sharp or cold. It was just honest. "I want you to think very carefully about why you're calling me this morning." Silence. "Is it because you feel genuine remorse for what you did to me and your mother?" "Yes, of course." "Or is it because you found out that the man you uninvited from your wedding is now wealthy?" Silence. A long, long silence, because those are 2 very different phone calls. I said, "And I need you to be honest with yourself before you say another word to me." I heard him breathing. Then I heard something else. He was crying, not polished, composed crying, real crying, the ugly, broken kind. "Dad," he said, and his voice was barely recognizable, "I am so ashamed of myself. I asked him to come home." Not that day. He was still in Chicago, newly married, fresh from a wedding night. But I asked him to come home the following weekend. Alone, without Jessica. He agreed immediately. That week was quiet in our house. Patricia busied herself in the garden. I went fishing by myself on Thursday morning, the way I used to when I needed to think. I sat at the edge of the lake, with my line in the water, and thought about everything. I thought about my father, who never once made me feel like an inconvenience. I thought about Uncle Harold, who lived simply and gave everything. I thought about the $52,000 I had sent, piece by piece, for a celebration I wasn't invited to attend. I thought about the moment Daniel's relief was visible when I said I'll figure it out. And I thought about Patricia going upstairs and closing the door. When Daniel arrived that Saturday, he looked like a different person from the composed, assured young man I was used to seeing. He looked tired. He looked smaller somehow. He stood at our front door with red eyes and could barely look at me when I opened it. I let him in. We sat in the living room. Patricia sat beside me. Daniel sat across from us, leaning forward, hands clasped together, the posture of a man preparing to confess. He spoke for a long time. He told us that it had been Jessica's decision initially, that her family had concerns about the presentation of the wedding, that they had worried about how the mixing of different worlds would look to their social circle. He told us that he had known it was wrong. He had known it the moment he made the phone call to me. He had known it when he typed that text message. Then why? Patricia said. Her voice was quiet, but there was a weight in it that I had never heard before. "Why did you do it? We are your parents, Daniel. I held you when you had nightmares. Your father wore the same 3 shirts for 6 years, so you could go to school without debt. Why? He had no good answer, because there isn't one. There is no good answer for that. He said, I was weak. I let someone else make me small. I made myself small, and I made you both feel invisible, and that is something I am going to have to live with. He looked at me then. Dad, the money, I need you to know that I'm not here because of the money. I don't care about the money. I'm here because I can't sleep, because every time I close my eyes I think about you sitting at home alone while we were at that wedding, and I think about the text I sent, and I feel sick. I studied my son's face. I had known this face since it was 3 hours old. I had watched it grow from infant to boy to man. I knew every expression it was capable of making. I knew the difference between his performed emotions and his real ones. What I saw right now was real. Daniel, I said, I'm going to tell you something that I have been thinking about all week. He waited. I am not angry at you, I said. Anger would be easier. Anger is clean and hot, and it passes. What I feel is something deeper and harder. I feel grief. I grieve for something I thought we had, a relationship where you knew. Bone, deep, that I was worth keeping close, that your mother was worth honoring. I grieve that somewhere along the way you learned to value appearance over truth. I leaned forward. But grief is not the end. Grief means you love something, and I still love you. I will always love you. But love without respect is just a feeling. For it to mean something, you have to act like it means something. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Patricia reached across and put her hand briefly on his knee, just for a moment, and then pulled it back. That small gesture, the instinct of a mother, even through her pain. The following week, I learned something that added a new layer to everything. Daniel called me on Tuesday evening. He sounded shaken. Dad, I need to tell you something about Jessica. He told me that during the honeymoon in Italy, he had found messages on Jessica's phone. Messages between her and her mother, going back 8 months. Messages that discussed the wedding, the planning, the guest list. In those messages, Jessica's mother had written, "Make sure Raymond and his wife are not invited. The last thing we need is construction workers at the venue making our friends uncomfortable." And Jessica had replied, "Already handled it. Daniel will make the call. Already handled it. Daniel will make the call." She had planned it, orchestrated it, and she had let Daniel be the one to make that phone call to me, to carry the weight of that cruelty, while she kept her hands clean. Daniel had confronted her about it. The honeymoon had ended 2 days early. They were in couples counseling now, he said. He didn't know what the future of the marriage looked like. I listened to all of this. When he finished, I said, "Daniel, I am sorry you are going through this, truly, but I need you to hear something. Jessica didn't make you make that call. She may have pushed, she may have planned. But you picked up that phone yourself. You knew it was wrong, and you did it anyway. That is yours. You have to own that." "I know," he said, "because if you spend this marriage, or the end of it, blaming her for what you chose, you will never grow into the man you could be." A long pause. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yeah, you're right. Now, let me tell you what I did. I did not cut Daniel out of my life. I did not write him out of a will, or punish him financially, or use the money as a weapon. I have never believed in using money as a weapon. That is not the kind of man my father raised, but I did make choices. I paid for Patricia's dental surgery, the surgery she had been putting off for 3 years. I had the roof properly repaired. I bought Patricia a small silver bracelet she had pointed at in a jewelry store window 7 years ago, and never asked for. I watched her face when she opened that box, and I thought, how many times did this woman sacrifice without complaint? How many times did she go without so others could have more? Too many, far too many. I also set up a charitable fund in Uncle Harold's name, a small scholarship for first-generation college students in our county. Kids whose fathers wore the same 3 shirts for 6 years. Kids who deserved a chance that money could provide. That felt right. That felt like honoring what Harold had spent a lifetime building. As for Daniel, 6 months later, he came home again, this time with Jessica. She sat across from Patricia and me, with different eyes than the first Thanksgiving. Less polished, more human. The careful social armor was cracked, and what was underneath, it was just a young woman who had made terrible choices, and was trying to understand herself well enough not to make them again. She apologized to us. To me, specifically, she said, "Mr. Raymond, what I did was snobbish and cruel, and I have no excuse that would make it okay. I am sorry." I accepted her apology, not because I had forgotten, not because everything was suddenly fine, but because I am not in the business of holding people prisoners to their worst moments. I have made my own mistakes. I have been my own worst self on certain days. Who am I to refuse someone the space to grow? Daniel and Jessica are still married. They are in counseling. It is hard work. Some weeks it goes better than others. But Daniel calls me every Sunday now. Every single Sunday. We talk about everything. About nothing. About the old days and the small things, and sometimes about the hard things. Last month he said, "Dad, I want you to know something. You are the best man I have ever known, and I spent a year being ashamed of that instead of proud. I'll never forgive myself for that." I said, "Don't waste your time not forgiving yourself. Spend that time being better. That's how you honor what we've been through." He said, "Okay, Dad." Just like when he was 7. I want to tell you what Patricia said to me one evening, about a month after everything came out. We were sitting on the porch again. Same porch, same evening light. She had a glass of lemonade. I had my coffee. She said, "You know what I keep thinking about, Raymond." "What's that?" "I keep thinking about the moment you said, 'I'll figure it out.' When he slid that paper across the table with the number. You didn't even flinch. You just said, 'I'll figure it out.' And I thought, this man will give everything he has and never ask for anything back." And I thought, how lucky am I to be loved by someone like that? She paused. But I also thought, how is it that Daniel can't see what I see? How does he look at you and not see a king? I didn't say anything for a while. Then I said, maybe we didn't teach him well enough to look. She shook her head. No, we taught him. He just stopped paying attention for a while. He'll remember. She took a sip of her lemonade. He already is, she said, and she was right. I have learned a few things from all of this. Let me share them with you, whoever you are watching this today. I learned that money reveals things. It doesn't change people. It reveals who they already were. And the absence of money reveals things too. What people thought of you when you had nothing is the truest measure of what they think of you. I learned that silence is not weakness. When Daniel told me I wasn't invited, I did not rage. I did not threaten. I did not beg. I said, okay, enjoy your day. And that silence, that quiet, dignified silence, did more than any argument could have. It gave Daniel the space to hear his own conscience. And his conscience was loud enough. I learned that love is not a transaction. I did not help pay for that wedding because I expected a seat at the table. I helped because I loved my son, and I wanted his happiness. The fact that my love was taken for granted does not make the love less real. It just makes the lesson more necessary. I learned that humility is not weakness. People looked at me and saw a construction worker in old shirts. They saw a man who was easy to overlook. But I had spent 37 years building things that lasted. And I had spent 63 years building a character that, when tested, did not crack. That is worth more than any $87,000 wedding. And I learned, perhaps most importantly, that it is never too late to come back to each other. Families break. Trust cracks. Words get said that leave marks. But if the love underneath is real, and if people are willing to do the hard, honest, painful work of repair, you can find your way back. Daniel and I are finding our way back. Every Sunday phone call, is a brick in that road. If you are a parent watching this, keep giving, keep loving, keep showing up, not for reward, not for recognition, but because that is who you are. The people who matter will eventually see it, and the ones who don't, that is their loss and their lesson, not yours. If you are a son or daughter watching this, look at the people who sacrificed for you. Really look. See the worn shoes and the skipped meals and the silent nights they sat up worrying so that you could sleep easy. See the love that never announced itself because it was too busy just being there. Don't wait for an inheritance letter to understand what you had. Don't wait for a Sunday morning of unanswered calls to realize what you threw away. And if you have already waited that long, if you are already Daniel, already mid, dial on a Sunday morning with regret sitting heavy in your chest, call anyway. It might not be too late. In my case it wasn't, but in other stories it is. Don't find out which story yours is the hard way. My name is Raymond. I have rough hands and a bad knee and a small house with a fixed roof. I have a wife who sees a king when she looks at me. And I have a son who is learning slowly, painfully, honestly to see the same thing. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything.